Well, we're almost done with 1 Peter, and we've been talking about it from the perspective of reminders. Peter is reminding us of things concerning the faith, but especially in the context of suffering, of Christians who are suffering because of persecution, because they are Christians. I mean, it's one thing to suffer just in general, right? But we're talking about suffering specifically because of your faith. And he introduces a lot of topics in 1 Peter that his readers apparently had some questions about, because there is a 2 Peter, which again touches on many of the same topics and expands on some of them. And some of those are introduced today, which means we're not going to go into depth because Peter does that for us in the next book. So we'll do that when we get there. But today, I want to look at this passage from the perspective of this, of living with expectations. What do you expect from being a Christian, from Christianity, from walking with Jesus? Expectations are funny things. They can be the source of some of the funniest moments in our lives when things don't go as we expect, or especially in movies or TV, what writers will do is they will build up your expectation and then blow it out of the water, right? Like, how many of you, if you've ever seen the classic I Love Lucy episode where she works in the candy shop, in the candy factory, right? She's there working, and the candies are coming down, and she's wrapping. They're doing a good job, her and Ethel. And then the supervisor says, all right, you're doing so good, let's crank it up. So more candy just comes plowing out of this thing, which, maybe you could expect that if someone's doing good, they can handle more work. But what you don't expect her to start doing is shoving it down her shirt and shoving her mouth full of chocolate. And you're going, this is not what I expected. And it's hilarious, right? Funny stuff happens like that. At the same time, it's funny how expectations can be a source of tremendous disappointment and frustration in our lives. When things don't go as we expected, it messes us up. Even simple things like a car breaking down. I go into the church van one day and I turn it over and the engine light's on. Not what I expected. And then when I figure out what's wrong with it, and consequently learn how long it's going to take to have this repaired, not what I expected. Much disappointment, much frustration. You'll notice that it hasn't been in the parking lot the last couple of weeks because it's still sitting in front of my house waiting for the part to come from the East Coast. Not fun. Our television broke a week and a half ago now, and it's under warranty, but you would expect, well, the guy will come out and he'll just tweak a few things and it'll be fine, or maybe it'll take a few days to get the part. No, it's going to be 2 weeks. And poor, spoiled American me, whose television is his pacifier. The children have the only working television in the house, and all they watch is SpongeBob. Which, I love SpongeBob, but not 24/7. That's right. I can handle it for a little while, and they don't have comfy chairs in the room, and it's not. I'm a big crybaby whiner, so I'll shut up about that. But things don't live up to our expectations. That can be disappointing. That can be frustrating. The other situation with expectations is that we have the wrong expectations, right? It's not just that things don't live up to them, it's we can have the wrong expectations. And so when things don't go the way we thought they should have gone, it'll mess us up. And that's how it can be when you're walking with the Lord. Things don't live up to your expectations. Oh, well, one of the things that didn't live up to my expectation was if you've ever seen Disneyland on television, like they show the classic, the Cinderella castle. That's the big main thing. But when you get there, what happens? You're like, whatever. This is dinky. On television, it looks huge. It looks neat, and the towers are just gigantic. And you get there, it's like, this is nothing. Totally doesn't live up to your expectation, or you had the wrong expectation. It's really frustrating when it happens in movies. You get psyched up to go see this movie that's maybe based on your favorite book or by your favorite author, and you go watch the thing and you go, this thing stinks. I want my money back. This is frustrating. You had the wrong expectation going in, and it didn't live up. The same thing can happen with the things of God. Sometimes people don't live up to our expectations. And maybe they're right expectations. They fail. They stumble. That can be us too. We cannot meet certain expectations, and that causes frustration and disappointment. But we can also have the wrong expectations. Sometimes it's the wrong expectations of God. Sometimes it's the wrong expectation of what we think we were promised or what we think we've been entitled to. And so it's from that perspective living with expectations and maybe correcting some expectations that I want to approach our passage today of 1 Peter 4, starting at verse 7. So let's read a little bit. And remember, we're in the middle of sort of Peter's thought that began way back in chapter 3, verse 8, and will end with today's bit. So we're kind of jumping in the middle here. He says this, "But the end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be serious and watchful in your prayers. And above all things, have fervent love for one another. For love will cover a multitude of sins." And he quotes an Old Testament passage. "Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it with the ability which God supplies. And in all things, God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen." And we're going to stop there. So this first bit, what I'm seeing and what sort of stands out to me is this. We need to live with the expectation that Jesus is going to come back at any minute and then live like it. Now, again, he only touches on this, but I want to say that again. Living with the expectation that Jesus is going to come back right now and then living like it. I mean, what Peter says this. He says, "But the end of all things is at hand." He starts off with "but." It's like he's saying, but like I was saying before, let's get back on track, back to what he was talking about in chapter 3, verse 8. He says, "The end of all things is at hand." This is the first century. I mean, to say something is at hand means it's right there. I mean, my cup of water is at hand. Reach out, grab it. It's right there. He says the end of all things is at hand. The end means the fulfillment, the consummation of all things. When you get to the end of a movie, what does it say? The end. Finished. The story is now complete. The thing is done. And he says the end of all things is at hand. I mean, they thought that then. How much more is it true today? I mean, what is coming? And again, I'm not going to go in depth. I just want to give a brief survey as to what the view of this church is as to the end of all things. And if you have a slightly different view, that's okay. We can talk about it and discuss it later, but this isn't really a salvation issue. What I believe and what I believe Paul teaches is that at some point, well, in the Old Testament too for that matter, at some point in the future, not depending on any event whatsoever, it could happen at any time for any reason, is this thing called the rapture. When God says, everybody come on home, and he meets us in the air, and those who are dead are resurrected. Those of us who are alive and remain are transformed into these glorified. It's like those of us who are alive get to skip death and go right to that resurrected form. That's what gets to happen. And we go meet him in the air. Could happen any time. Now, that's not the return of Jesus. The return when he actually physically comes later. But this event could happen now. Remember I talked about rapture practice? Not now. Okay. You got to practice once in a while, though, right? It could happen at any time. And at some point after that, could be the next day, could be the next week, month, year, we don't know. What is sometimes referred to as Daniel's 70th week, or the events of Revelation 6 to 19. This 7-year period where the first half, one set of things happen, but the second half is called the Great Tribulation, when things are just ugly and nasty. It's God finally saying, that's all I can stand, I can't stand no more. And he pours out his wrath finally on a Jesus Christ rejecting world. But when that happens, no one knows the day or the hour, right? We don't know when. We don't know when the rapture happens. We don't know when that's going to happen. But Peter says the end of all things, it's at hand. It's right here at any moment to be experienced, to happen. Then he says, therefore, because this is true, be serious and watchful in your prayers. Be serious. The word for serious means be straight-minded. Get your mind ready for action. Your mind, be serious. It's the word for, well, in contrast, these are kind of both the same word. Watchful, interestingly enough, means not drunk. It means sober. Don't be intoxicated. It means you get your mind, and because you're not, you're able to be watchful, right? So be serious, be right-minded, be straight-minded, and don't be intoxicated. Don't be watchful in your prayers. I mean, to understand that this could happen at any moment should give us some motivation, should give us a sense of urgency. It could be not out of fear, but out of, let's go. Let's get our game face on. Let's get ready. Let's take off on this thing. Turn to 1 Thessalonians 5. We're going to read a little bit out of that sort of parallels what Peter's talking about. 1 Thessalonians. No VeggieTales fans? Okay, fine. Anyway. 1 Thessalonians 5, starting in verse 1, Paul says, "But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren," talking to believers, "you have no need that I should write to you. For you yourselves know perfectly, completely, that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you," there's a contrast between these two different peoples, "you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober." There's that idea again, being serious, being watchful. "For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet, the hope of salvation." Sort of an allusion to the spiritual armor from Ephesians 6. "For God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him," meaning whether we're alive or we're dead. "Therefore, comfort each other and edify one another, just as you also are doing." So Paul's exhortation to be watchful, to be ready, to be sober-minded, to be awake. And Peter extends that to prayers. He's assuming that people are praying. Good assumption. We should be praying, right? We should be praying specifically, fervently, praying without ceasing, as Paul says elsewhere. But he says, "Therefore, because the end of all things is at hand, be serious and watchful in your prayers." And then verse 8, "And above all things, have fervent love for one another, for love covers a multitude of sins." This word above, it means first, before everything else. It's the prefix pro. For that in English, we have the words pro before a certain word. It means first, at the very top, above everything else, first on priority for our lives. Remember, this is living as though Jesus is coming back at any moment. Above all things, have fervent love. Have it. Hold it. Possess it. It's in your hands. It's in your grip. Have this thing. Well, what is this thing? This fervent love. And we saw this fervent love referred to back in chapter 1, verse 22. Peter said, "Since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth, through the spirit and sincere love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart." So he's reminding them in his own reminder to love this way. This word fervent, it means, we talked about how it means to stretch. Love that is stretched out, as though you're stretching out, trying to reach, trying to grab something. And I was reminded, it's funny how you can be reminded of something you did, but not by yourself. Anyway, I was reminded of when I was in track in high school. I ran track a little bit in middle school and a little bit in high school. And my favorite event was the 200, right? And my best time was something like 23:75. And at our school, our high school, our track was, it was this material, it was this black, it looked like someone took tires and shredded them and then compressed them. It was this shredded material, but it was spongy but firm, good stuff to run on. But when it got wet, it was slippery. And if you didn't have your spikes on, it was easy to sort of like ice skate on this track. And it's Washington, Oregon. Rains all the time. Springtime especially, you get those spring rains come in. And one track meet, it had been sort of misty, sort of rainy, so the track was a little slick. But I ran the race, had my spikes on, and it was really close at the end. So what I did, what you're supposed to do as a runner, is you stretch, right? You lean, and I stretched out, and it turns out that I won, but as I was stretching, I stretched too far and lost my balance and slid on this nice rubbery, slick stuff, and I had these big, long burns on my arms and on my chest, and it was really pretty. But it was that stretching. That's what it was. Stretching out to win, stretching out to grab, stretching out to get. That's the kind of love that Peter says we're supposed to have above all. above all else that we do with and for one another, have that fervent, stretched out love. And this love is that agape love. It's the love that is completely given over to the other. Love covers a multitude of sins. The funny thing about love, and I was thinking about this, we're always commanded to love because it's hard. It can be hard to love. There's this brotherly love, which you can kind of fake and you can kind of get by, oh, brother, hey, how's it going? I'll pray for you. But this love that is completely given over to, you can't really fake, and we're often encouraged and commanded to love in this way. Jesus himself said that the world will know you're my disciples because of your love one for another. But something else that's hard that I don't think we think about too often, and I'm not going to really develop this too much, is that it can be hard to let others love you. It can be just as hard to let people in, as it were. Some people can be it's very easy to reach out and to love and to give, but they have this privacy, this wall that says no one may enter. No one may come in, whether it's because out of fear, they don't want others to see a weakness that's in them. It's very intimate. That's the implication behind love, isn't it? Is intimacy, to let people in. It's one thing to give out, but love also means letting people in. And I want to encourage all of us to consider, as we love one another, are you letting people in? Because we're a body, aren't we? And we'll visit this here in a moment, but we're this interconnected body. I mean, how would a cell in your body exist if it only gave out but didn't allow in? What would happen to that cell? It would die, right? It would be malnourished, it would die, and dead is bad. You don't want dead cells in your body like that. They need to be interacting, they need to be giving and taking. So something to think about. And he says, here's why. Love covers a multitude of sins. It's especially difficult to love and be loved when you're suffering for your faith. Remember, that's the context, is suffering for your faith. And he says, as we do this, even if we wrong one another, this love, it covers up. It hides. This word means to wrap up, like a present. It covers so you can't see what's inside, and it's gone. It's out of sight, out of mind. Love covers a multitude of sins. Because we're going to get impatient, we're going to get ticked off, tension will happen, but if we come back to loving first, all of that just sort of melts away. He goes on in verse 9 to say, be hospitable to one another without grumbling. This mini list of exhortations, be hospitable. This word means to love strangers. It's literally what the word means, a lover of strangers. And I think he's encouraging them in this because, back in those days, when you would travel, the places that you could go stay were kind of seedy, it's not good places. People, men and women, applying their trades outside the hotel looking for customers. And so Peter's encouraged them, you Christians, as you travel and as people travel to where you are, let people in. Let them stay at your house instead of having to stay at the motel or the hotel or whatever the thing is. Be hospitable. Open your home. Be a lover of strangers, because really we're not strangers to one another, are we? If you've ever gone somewhere and met Christians you've never met before, and you realize how much each of you love the Lord, there's this weird connection. There's this odd thing that happens that you just really come together and you're drawn to one another, and it's really cool. But he says, be hospitable to one another without grumbling. And this is one of those words, I haven't been able to verify this yet, but it's one of those things called an onomatopoeia. Have you heard of this? I know it's one of those, what is that word? It's a word, it's a dumb word to describe what the thing is. It's a word that sounds like the thing that it is. So you watch the old Batman show, right, with Adam West, and every time Batman would hit somebody, what did it do? Pow! That's an onomatopoeia. Pow, whack, boom, blam, right, exactly. Or pop. Pop is, and I think this is one of those because I'm trying to make sure I can say this right, goguzmos. It sounds like grumbling. Fred Flintstone, right? That grumbling sort of sound. He says, don't do it with grumbling. Another fun onomatopoeia in the Bible is barbarian. They use the word barbarian to describe someone who didn't speak Greek, therefore they were a foreigner. They were a barbarian because to them, their language sounded like bar, just sounded like gibberish, barbarian. I think this is one of those words that just describes what it sounds like because it's grumbling. There, stupid, dumb, right? He says, don't do that. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. So there's a brief look at this, living with the expectation of Jesus coming back at any time and living like it. Love one another. Cover up those sins. Be hospitable. Don't grumble to one another. And now he's going to kind of shift towards another idea of living with the expectation that God is going to work among us and through us. That God is going to work amongst us and through us and in us. And that's what verse 10 sort of picks up on. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. You can't receive a gift unless someone gives it to you. And who gives us these gifts? God. So it's God working amongst us, working through us. And this word for gift is that word charisma, charismatic. Charisma. It's spiritual gifts. When you go back to other passages that talk about this, it's that same word, the charismas, the spiritual gifts of, all of them, whether it be tongues or faith or administrations or service or helps or words of knowledge, whatever these gifts are, he says, as each one has received a gift, minister it or serve it to one another. So you have the gift of helps, serve that gift of helps to other people. Like a server in a restaurant. Dish it out. Deliver it out. You have this gift. Serve it out to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Stewards, right? A steward is a household manager, someone who takes care of the stuff that they've been given. So we are stewards of what? The manifold grace of God, the various graces, the gifts of God. And then it's cool because in verse 11 he gives examples of these. He says, if anyone speaks, let him speak as of the oracles of God. So speaking is not the word for teaching. It just means someone who is speaking, right? Someone who is in the assembly who is speaking. Let him speak as though they were the oracles of God. Now, it's not the word of God because it's a different idea. This oracles, it means the things of God, the ideas of God, the commands of God, the instructions of God. And he's saying this because he doesn't want the people who are speaking to give their own ideas. This isn't me speaking what I think. This is me speaking what God says. That's what he wants them to do. Don't just stand up there and pontificate your own opinions. Deliver God's oracles, God's commands, God's words. And that's what I get to do, and I'm blessed to do it. But every week I'm freaked out. It's like I have to, not what Corby thinks, not his weirdness or anything that might just be true to what God is saying. Just do that. Well, and here's why. If you want to, you can turn to James. Oops, too far. Nope, wrong slide. James 3:1. I'll get this thing figured out one of these days. Just a few pages to the right to speak these oracles of God. Oop, nope, wrong way. Left. I'll get this book figured out too one day too. James 3:1. He says, "My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment." Right? All these, young guys, I remember being in Bible college, everyone wants to be the next Greg Laurie, the next Billy Graham, the next Chuck Smith, the next whoever, because they want to be up front. They want to be the guy speaking, the guy getting the attention and gets to teach, yea, multitudes. And James says, dude, cool it, all right? Because of you being up there, your judgment is going to be more strict than other people's judgment. Consequently, I'm freaked out a little bit every week because of that. But if anyone speaks, let him speak as of the oracles of God. You're speaking the things of God, not your own things. If anyone ministers, let him do it as with the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. It says, whatever you've been given by God, use it. Do it. This must be where that other slide was supposed to be. You don't have to turn to these just for reference, but Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12 both use the idea of a body. Like we said earlier, we are a body. Each part of the body has different functions, has different uses, gives different things, needs different things, and we need to be that for one another. We need to be giving and receiving when we're weak, giving when we're strong. And he says, if anyone has this stuff, use it. Do it. Because Well, look, just what he says there in verse 11. Let him do it as with the ability which who supplies? God supplies. Not with your own ability. It's not like God says, here, you go and do it. He's the one who gives it to you, and then he's the one who gives you the ability to do it. He supplies it. And this word for supplies is really kind of cool. It's the word from which we get our word choreographer. Now, I don't know what comes to your mind when you think of the word choreographer. If you think like, New York, Broadway, Hollywood, dance stuff, the idea then was this. We might call it a chorus producer. It has the idea of a producer. A guy who had his own theater troupe back then. That's what this is describing. It's his troupe. He provides the money. He provides the vision. He provides the direction. It's his production. It's his money that's on the line. He's the one who supplies what the different people in the chorus need. That's, in a sense, what God does. This is his show. This is all his production. And he gives us the stuff that we need to play our various parts. And I was reminded of something I had to do in high school, again, with the high school thing. Because you needed credits back then, we looked at high school stuff today, and it's like you could skip your junior, senior year and still graduate. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. But I digress. I had to make up some English credits. I took Shakespeare, which was great. I mean, I was already a drama nerd, so Shakespeare sort of fit in with that. And one of the assignments we had to do was memorize the monologue that begins with "All the world's a stage." Right? All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are players. They have their exits, and they have their entrances, and each person in their time plays their part. And it's this great little monologue. And there were about, 15 of us in this class, and we were arranged in this U shape with the chairs. And Mrs. Wright was the teacher. Great lady, super fun lady. We all mostly loved her. And so each of us had to individually go to the front of the class, sit on the stool, and recite this monologue. So, which is funny, because if you were at the end of the list, you could have not done any work and just sat and listened to it 14 times and probably done it. But we went alphabetically, and Stevens, I'm towards the end, and I got up there, and I did it. And I did it okay. You weren't supposed to act it. All you had to do was say it. You just had to memorize the thing and then recite it. So I got up there, I did it, and she goes, and I stand up to go back and sit down, and she goes, okay, now do it again without the gum this time. And this is where the drama nerd kicks in. I'm like, okay, lady, this is how we're going to play this? Okay. So what I did instead of just sitting there is this. And again, it describes the progression of people through 7 stages of life. All right? And so what I did is I went around the room and stood behind a different person for each stage of life. The first stage is the baby. It's the child mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and I stood behind someone who did that. I went to another person. The second stage is the schoolboy who goes reluctantly to school, and I happened to pick someone who was sort of known for that. The third stage is the young man in love, sighing and lost in love, and then it goes to a soldier. One who is big and strong and wants to make a reputation for himself. And then it goes from soldier to a judge, a man, just someone who's grown up, who's become a figure of authority, who has fine robes and a fine wig probably, and just lives well. And I got to, after the judge was, I've lost track, but it goes to just an old man, just an old person, someone who's lived their life, and they're sort of in this older stage of their life. But it ends really sad. It's funny, but it's sad at the same time. It ends with this picture of someone who's just this shell of who they used to be. Right? He uses the word sans. Sans means without, but he says without teeth, without eyes, without taste, without anything. Sans teeth, sans taste, sans eyes, sans everything. And it ends just with this sad sort of picture. And as I was going around the room, it turns out Mrs. Wright was at the end of my little circuit. So when I got to that sans teeth, I stood right behind her and put my hands on her chair. And I said, sans eyes, sans teeth, sans taste, sans everything. And people are like, yeah, that was awesome. And she was a good sport about it. When you're 18, anybody over 50 is old. And so she was old to me. And so she was that sans everything. It was just kind of funny. But even that reminds us that not just as an individual in a body do we play different parts. As we grow up, as we mature, as we go through life and simply age, even if we spend our whole life in one church, we can play different parts. We can do different things. For one season, you're in this role. For another season, you're in a different role. And sometimes people get the idea that they can do the one thing, and that's their thing forever. They're always the flower person. They're always the cookie person. They're always the greeter person. They're always... No, we go through stages. We go through periods of life where we do different stuff. But Peter's telling us that it's not even us who does the stuff. It's God who gives us the abilities, the gifts, and then supplies the ability to do them. So we need to have this expectation of God living in us, living amongst us, working amongst us. There's this interaction, there's this wholeness that needs to be there, especially as we go through suffering as Christians, which is kind of odd to talk about in our culture because we really don't. Beyond maybe occasionally someone tries to weasel a way to fire you, even though that's illegal. You can't be fired because you're a Christian, but people find ways to do things, or not hire you because you're a Christian, or people make fun of you on the job, or make fun of you at school, or that's really the persecution we face today in America. In other parts of the world, whole different story. But back then especially, they were really going through some heavy stuff. So, and it's as we get to those points that we need one another. We need the gifts that each of us has that God supplies, which is why it's to him in all things that God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory forever and ever. Amen. Like I said, it's his show. He's the one who gets the credit. It's not, look what we have done. Look at this great church we have built. No. This is what God has done. He's the one who gets the glory and the credit when the curtain falls. That's how it works. And then he transitions into this other idea. And I like to think of it as living with the expectation of trials to strengthen our faith and suffering because of Jesus. We need to live with the expectation of trials to strengthen our faith, but also suffering because of Jesus. And they're two different topics, but they're kind of all wrapped up into this idea of suffering. Verse 12, it says this, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. But rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy." So he says, beloved, you guys, don't think it's strange when this stuff happens to you. Which can happen, right? Something comes down in your life and you're like, this is weird. Where did this come from? Well, what have I done to deserve this? This seems really odd to me. And Peter says, hey, you have the wrong expectation. Your expectation for this life is a little off. You need to have it readjusted. Don't think it's strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you. This fiery trial could refer to a few different things, and they're probably all right in a sense. They were going through fiery trials, literally. The Caesars burning Christians alive. That is a fiery trial. Figuratively, the trials that we go through can feel hot. They feel pressure. They feel uncomfortable. But which is to try you. And it also maybe conveys the picture of a refiner. We've talked about this picture too, of the silversmith who has to keep the material at a certain temperature, like 900 some degrees specific. There's a specific temperature for a specific amount of time. So it's hot and it's pressure and it's a fiery trial. But what it does is it produces a beautiful gold or a silver, or whatever the metal that the individual happens to be working with. So it's fire and it's hot and it's uncomfortable. But he says it's to try you, it's to test you, it's to build you up, it's to make you stronger. That's what these things are for. And then he says in verse 13 again, but rejoice. Instead of being freaked out and going, what's going on? What? This is so confusing. He says, rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. So like I said at the beginning, there's suffering that is just a part of life. You get a flat tire. It's not because you're a Christian. It's because you ran over a nail or who knows what it was. There are things in life that are just suffering. You get a cold, you stub your toe, who knows what it is, that have nothing to do with being a Christian, which is why he says, rejoice to the extent that you partake in Christ's sufferings. So when you suffer for being a Christian, there should be a rejoice dynamic to it. It's not like, yay, I'm suffering all the time no matter what. No. because of your relationship with God. You see, suffering because you're living in Jesus and He is in you is normal. I don't know if you had that expectation, but because you are in Christ and because He is in you and you are living that out, suffering to one degree or another is normal. It produces tension in our lives, and if that tension is missing, something is missing. If your Christianity is a secret, like no one knows about it, not because you're keeping it a secret necessarily, but because maybe you're just not living it out the way it should be being lived out, something's wrong. There's supposed to be some tension there. And again, difference between just general suffering because of life and suffering because you're a Christian. They can be two different things, and one should be a source of rejoicing. The other one is just stinks. It's no fun. We tend to think that suffering and blessing are opposites, that blessing is good and suffering is bad, and a real Christian should always be being blessed and never endure suffering, right? That's what the preaching you hear on TV and the Christian books that you can buy are all about that. And if you're suffering, something's wrong with you. Something's amiss. Something with you and God's not right because God wants to bless. You can be blessed and suffering at the same time. Bing, 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 bing. What a radical thought. No, suffering and blessing can be happening at the same time. God can bless you. He can provide for you. You can be healthy. Everything can be great. But you can still be suffering for Him. There are two different dynamics that can coexist. It's not one or the other. And in fact, the whole epistle of Philippians is about suffering because of being a Christian. What does he say? Rejoice. I will say it again, rejoice. He wants to emphasize that. But there should be a tension in our lives. And it's going somewhere. And that's what the second half of verse 13 is about. That when His glory is revealed, remember, we started off with the end of all things is at hand. That's when His glory is going to be revealed. That when His glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. Because you suffered with Him. You suffered for Him. When His glory is revealed and everyone can see it, you're going to think, this has been worth it. This is why I went through all of this stuff on His behalf, because of Him and me, because of me and Him. This is why. God's glory, I can't even describe it. John tries to, but it's so mind-blowing that you can't describe it. But there will be a rejoice dynamic to it. And then in verse 14, he goes on with some examples of this trials and this suffering for Jesus' sake. Verse 14, if you are reproached or reviled or somebody, bags on you for the name of Christ, blessed are you. For the Spirit of glory, the Spirit of the glory and of God, let me try that one more time. For the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. On their part, the ones who were doing this to you, He is blasphemed, but on your part, He is glorified. So if you guys are going through stuff because of the name of Christ, because you're living in His name, because you are deliberately living your life for Jesus, you're blessed. We've mentioned before, one of the things they had to do regularly, once a year, was to burn just a pinch of incense on a fire and declare Caesar is king, Caesar is God, something to that effect. Which, if you do that, you are taking Jesus off the throne. It's a direct contradiction to saying Jesus is Lord. Jesus said, if you deny me before men, I will deny you before the Father. And to do that pinch of incense, just that simple little act, was to deny Jesus. And this is something they had to do every year. And he says, if you're reproached for the name of Christ, blessed are you, or blessed are you, for the Spirit of glory and the Spirit of God rests upon you. They think they're blaspheming, but on your part, God is glorified. Turn to Acts 4. We will just look at a couple quick passages in Acts that touch on this. We go through, I don't know about you, but I went through part of my high school career as a Christian trying not to be made fun of, so I kind of kept it on the lowdown a little bit, at least at school. You want to fit in, right? Nobody wants to be made fun of, but when you're really living for Him, that's one thing that's going to happen. Acts 4 is when Peter and John heal the guy in the temple and they get arrested, and this is what happens after they're let go, verse 23. And being let go,
they went to their own companions, they went to the other believers, and reported all that the chief priests and elders had said to them. So when they heard that, what had happened, they raised their voice to God and with one accord said, Lord, you are God, who made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, who by the mouth of your servant David have said, why do the nations rage? And why do people plot vain things? The kings of the earth took their stand, and the rulers were gathered together against the Lord and against his Christ. For truly against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate with the Gentiles and the people of Israel were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined before to be done. Now, Lord, look on their threats and grant to your servants that with all boldness they may speak your word by stretching out your hand to heal, and that signs and wonders may be done through the name of your holy servant Jesus. And when they prayed, the place where they were assembled together was shaken, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and spoke the word of God with boldness. Did they get together to pray, God protect us, God help us to hide, God help us to not get hurt and persecuted? No. They said, more, God. Give us more boldness. Give us the ability to go out more and do this even better, which they do. And that's what takes us to chapter 5. At the end of chapter 5, they've disobeyed the command and they've done the same thing. Chapter 5, verse 41. They got arrested again. They've been let go again. So they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. And daily in the temple and in every house, they did not cease teaching and preaching Jesus as the Christ. So they saw it as a badge of honor, just like Peter says here. This is how we know we're doing it right, because we're being persecuted because of him in our lives. And then in verse 15, so if you're suffering for Christ, great. But verse 15, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or as a busybody in other people's matters. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in this matter. It seems like a weird list, doesn't it? Murderer, thief, evildoer, and a busybody. Why would he be concerned with these believers suffering as a murderer or as a thief? And I think, and the thinking on this is that people took matters into their own hands. When they're being persecuted, Cousin Fred gets arrested and taken and executed. That makes you mad. You want to do something about it, so you go kill one of the guards, right? Somebody takes money from you as punishment because you aren't paying what you're supposed to pay to the government or whoever. And so what do? They've taken your money. What are you going to do back? You're going to take money back from them, right? As a thief, someone does something to you or hurts your family, you're going to do evil back. I think he's talking about retribution. He says, if you're going to suffer, do it for being a Christian, not because you're a Christian thief or a Christian murderer. And this word busybody, the idea is one who is an overseer of other people's stuff. It's these two words that mean other people's stuff and bishop. It's the word for bishop or for overseer. So he says, don't get into other people's lives. Don't put yourself as a bishop over other people's business, neglecting your own stuff. Don't do that, right? You will suffer for that. Yet, if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed. We should be ashamed for suffering for those other things, but don't be ashamed for suffering as a Christian, but let him glorify God in this matter, in this thing, or in this name. For the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God, verse 17. And if it begins with us first, what will be the end of those who do not obey the gospel of God? So he says the time has come, the moment, the opportunity has come for judgment to begin here. And again, it calls back to verse 7, but the end of all things has come. Time for judgment has come. And this isn't a judgment that means discerning who is saved and unsaved, or discerning good from bad or right from wrong. This word for judgment means the pronouncement of the thing that's already been judged. This is the sentencing. This is the verdict being given out. And he says if this judgment, if this sentencing, if this verdict begins here, how much worse is it going to be for the rest of the world? Which I think it's part of that flow of thought. If you're living for God, you're not going to go seek vengeance in murder or thieving or doing evil, because you remember, judgment starts here. that should motivate us. It should change our life and how we think about things, because God himself says, vengeance is mine. Don't worry about it. Judgment begins at the house of God. And again, it's not judging whether you're saved or not. It's this giving out what's already been decided. Verse 18, now, if the righteous one is scarcely saved, where will the ungodly and the sinner appear? It's this contrast between, if the righteous are barely saved. You ever think about that? It's easy. I think as these people were going through this suffering, this persecution, they probably developed a sense of entitlement. They probably thought, well, I'm going through this, so God owes me something. So at some point, it's going to let up. At some point, it's going to relax, and I'm expecting something. And Peter says, you know what? We're all saved by the skin of our teeth. Actually, we're not saved by anything of us. We're saved by blood. Blood. That is the only thing that saves us. Not because we've endured, not because we've earned, but because of what Jesus has done. And if the righteous one is scarcely saved, if we're just barely saved as it is, where's the ungodly one going to be? The ones who don't believe, the ones who haven't put their faith and trust in Jesus, where are they going to be? It's God's grace, isn't it? Grace is a funny thing, and I had this discussion this week online, but one of the lessons I learned from this discussion is that God's grace is both the biggest draw for people to come to Jesus, God's grace, and it's also the biggest obstacle. People have a hard time with the idea of God forgiving someone simply because they repent and they ask. How could God forgive a murderer? How could God forgive a rapist? How could God forgive whatever the worst thing is you could think of? He can. He does. I mean, Paul says, I was the chief of sinners. I murdered Christians, Paul says, and yet look at me. Not because of me, but because of what Jesus has done in me. And it's this grace that both draws people and is an obstacle, and it repels people. It's a weird dual dynamic. But it is God's grace that saves us. Nothing we have done, nothing we have earned. We have been bought. We have been paid for. We belong to him. And at the end, he sort of alludes to this idea of living with the expectation of God being faithful with what we commit to him. Verse 19, therefore, let those who suffer according to the will of God commit their souls to him in doing good as to a faithful creator. So there's the word therefore again. Because of all these things, let those who suffer according to the will of God commit their souls to him. We run into this will of God before, back in last week in chapter 4, verse 2. He says, that you no longer should live the rest of this time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but live for the will of God. This will of God, it's God's intentions that bring him pleasure. And we referenced Revelation 4:11, where it says that all things were created for your will or by your pleasure. This is God's will. This is his intention. This is what he wants, and it's for a good thing. So if we suffer according to the will of God, the things that will ultimately bring him pleasure, we need to commit our souls to him. It's not just committing our finances or committing whatever it is that makes us feel secure. It's committing our souls, our eternity to him, committing these things to him and doing good as to a faithful creator. God's faithful, right? Now, it's something we can acknowledge, but it's something that takes time to build. And as Bill Ritchie used to say, faith is produced through time and testing, which is what we just read about, isn't it? This suffering for being a Christian, suffering going through this stuff, builds us up. So if you have this expectation that the life of a Christian is supposed to be this just easy skate through living, and then you get to go to heaven at the end, that's not it at all. It's as we live for him, there will be suffering. Yes, God blesses. Yes, God gives. Yes, God equips and wants us to have joy, but it's not one or the other. It's both. It's this weird dynamic. Both things happen. We need to give this stuff to him as a faithful creator. So, what are your expectations? Hopefully they've been tweaked a little if they were different. We need to have the right expectations, expecting Jesus to come back at any minute and then living like it, expecting God to work among us and through us, expecting trials to strengthen our faith and suffering because of Jesus in our lives, and then expecting God to be faithful with whatever it is we commit to him. You can trust him. He's faithful. You can give it all to him, and he will take care of it. It's especially our souls, and that only happens through Jesus.